This is Film Talk, where we interview the brightest minds in filmmaking 5 days a week. Do you need a great camera for your next shoot? You may want to consider the world's lightest handheld Super 35 digital film camera, Blackmagic's Ursa Mini 4.6K. The Ursa Mini boasts a 4.6K sensor, global shutter, and up to 15 stops of dynamic range. It's perfectly balanced for handheld use and comfortable enough to be used all day long. Scene 1, take 1. Film Talk Nation, we are Greenlight for yet another great show. Vanessa Frank here, and I'm excited to bring you our featured guest today, Barrett Leigh. Barrett, are you ready for your close-up?
I am.
Barrett Leigh is a veteran of large and franchise movie production. His past work includes production supervisor of Fast and Furious 6, This Is 40, Bridesmaids, The Karate Kid, and Year One, as well as production coordinator roles for the Fast and the Furious Tokyo Drift, Knocked Up, and Pirates of the Caribbean Dead Man's Chest. Barrett has been a long-term collaborator of Judd Apatow's, and today is moving into becoming a producer in his own right. Barrett is a true authority on turning concepts into reality and is absolutely the guy you want on speed dial when facing a filming challenge. Barrett, it's an honor to have you on the show today.
Well, thank you. I would like to have that recorded, which I will, which I do now, and just played every morning when I wake up.
Absolutely. Put it on your voicemail message, right?
Thanks, yes. If I worked out, which I don't, I would listen to that over and over again while I was working out. So, yeah.
Well, glad it pleases you. So Barrett, you have obviously had a long and illustrious career. How did you first get into the film industry?
Totally on accident. I find that most people in the film industry never planned on getting involved in the film industry. But I got out of college. I was a theater guy. I was a theater nerd my whole life, and up until then, and got out of college. I was trying to be a visual artist, which I am miserable at. I can draw stick figures and sometimes close on them. So I was in an art department store, like a Wrecking Box is what it was called, and picking up art supplies for an inevitably failed venture of trying to paint or draw. And I ran into a woman that was looking for a PA to work in the art department on a movie called October Sky. And I was broke as a joke, so I said, "Hey, I can do it." And then from there, I kind of fell in love with the business, and that was it.
So you never really had kind of any formal training per se. It sounds kind of like you learned more on the job.
Yeah, no, it was definitely no. There was no formal training, no film school, no. I was in a bunch of my friends' film school movies. That was always fun. But no, I didn't. I was not the, aspiring cinematographer from 3 years old. I didn't come out of the womb with a DSLR or anything like that. So I mean, no.
How on earth did you transition from, you're kind of this, PA to the art department, and you're kind of getting a taste in your mouth for filmmaking? How did you go from that to, getting to work with Judd Apatow? In 2 easy steps.
Yeah. Do you want the PG version, the R version, or the F?
Give me whichever version is the most entertaining. Which I'm guessing with Judd Apatow is probably an R-rated version.
Yeah. Just being within 50 feet of him is an R-rated, moment. No, no, it was Judd was much later on. I saddled up with a bunch of actors. I went from October Sky, and then I went to General's Daughter, which was another movie, and I met John Travolta, and he and I, through some interesting circumstances, kind of clicked, and so he helped me along, got me out to LA. And then I assisted another actor, Ben Affleck, back in the Project Greenlight, the first Project Greenlight, and the Bennifer days and all of that stuff. And so, and then through, kind of being around him, I was exposed to a lot of great people like Stratton Leopold, who's an amazing producer, Mace Neufeld, who's an old school amazing producer. It was when I met him, it was a day and age where he'd give me a stock of quarters, and I'd have to run to the payphone and call the production office and tell them what his question was or his commandment was, and then I'd run back to him and tell him, like, relaying information. No cell phones back then.
Oh my gosh.
But he was, he did The Omen and some just classic movies. So then from there, it was all ups and downs from there. I mean, everybody hit that time in their career where things stop. I definitely hit that time where, things stopped for me, and people for whatever reason wouldn't return my phone call. And I ended up working on these weird transgender documentaries. But then, then things happen. People remember you. It's kind of the way it happens in the business. People forget you, and then one day when they need you, they remember you. So I got back in it and went on to like Pirates of the Caribbean and movies like that.
It sounds to me that you really built your career based on providing a lot of value to people, figuring out the solutions and being that person that, as you just said, when they, when they've hit on a challenge, you've kind of been a name that's come to their mind. How have you kind of, provided that value? How have you made yourself someone that that the Pirates of the Caribbean team would think to, pick up the phone and book you?
It's something that was great in the beginning, and it bit me in the ass later on in my career. And the reason is I came kind of from nothing. I know everybody says that line, I came from nothing and blah, blah, blah. But I didn't have much to my name, in the start of my life. And, so I learned that basically giving away my ideas and giving away my free time and my work and obsessing for people about what they need the most, and taking the blows instead of the person that I was working under, meaning if they screwed up, see that I was censoring myself just in case. If they screwed up, then I would step up and I would say, no, my bad. I'll take the hit for that one from the studio. And it worked great in the beginning. It worked fantastic. If I came up with an idea, I would send pages to, whoever was the low man producer on the rung who could front those pages up the rung and, kind of hopefully win the day. And many times that worked. But I never got the credit. I never asked for it. And I just kept my head low and I kept trudging along. And that was great. That worked fantastic for the first 60% of my career. And then one day I realized that I've busted my balls making other people wealthy and rich with creative content. And then it's a hard mechanism to turn around once you've started a very servitude lifestyle for other people, promoting them, getting them into good spots. And then one day you look at them and go, okay, my turn. Most people don't give you your turn because they don't want it, because then maybe, just maybe, you'll be better. So it's a hard way to go, but that's how I kind of clamor my way. So when you say making, other people important, or I'm making, whatever, I'm important to them, I don't think I was important. I think they knew that they could use me and use kind of my hard labor and my creative ideas and run with them, and they would work. Kind of grim sounding now that I say it, but that's kind of it. But it works. It works in the beginning. It's just turning it around that makes it very tough.
I think it's a challenge that a lot of, particularly a lot of executives in more junior roles face, that transition from agent's assistant to agent. It's really difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And I think,
Oh, yeah.
I think it's definitely one of the bigger challenges that many of us have to face in our career. Obviously, you mentioned Project Greenlight earlier, which I'm fascinated about because that's actually not something I was aware about in terms of your past history. You've evidently come from a background where you've really learned on the job through experience, and Project Greenlight is definitely that model of that idea of, hey, let's let's take someone who maybe hasn't gone the formal route and hasn't necessarily had all of the opportunities, and let's give them that opportunity and infrastructure. Do you feel that that is the most beneficial route to go about getting into the industry as a producer or director, just to kind of wing it and get some experience under your belt? Or do you believe that there is a place for formal training?
No, I don't believe this is a terrible thing for me to say. There is a place for formal training for people, and that place is comfortable. I don't believe that when you come out of that formal training, no matter how good or poor it was, you'll be ready for what's going to hit you. I think you come out of that training, and we're talking about like film schools and whatnot, and I feel like people have a misunderstanding of how easy or hard it is to get in the business. I'm old school, so I think roll up your sleeves and get yourself dirty. And honestly, a lot of people, one thing that formal training does that's misleading is it pigeonholes everybody into director, actor, writer, producer, some kind of high-end, above the line place. And in reality, not everybody's meant to be that. So the good benefit of just rolling up your sleeves and getting on a set, and a lot of the sets I worked on when I first started out were freebies. I mean, there's a guy I worked for on a movie called Art of a Bullet. He called me Best Boy Grip. I never gripped a day in my life, but I tried it out, and it was a wealth of experience. It was great because I saw every facet of filmmaking, and I knew for a fact I wasn't meant to be a grip. I just screw it up. So I bounced around, and I think when you roll up your sleeves and get on set, you get a better understanding of where you, the person, belong, rather than having outside influencers saying, try this, try this. Your outside influencers on a set is get it right or move on, and that's great, I think. I think that kind of, presses you into whatever component of filmmaking you're supposed to be in.
I absolutely agree with you. And, I think there's definitely some great programs out there, but I kind of feel that the best programs are the ones that combine that classroom teaching with real life experience, that have the
Mm-hmm.
great internships, the great real life opportunities. So Barrett, obviously, I would imagine you have 1,000,001 stories from all of these really big scale sets that you've worked on, and all of the shenanigans that you've undoubtedly been a party to.
Mm.
But for you personally, what is the biggest challenge that you've encountered so far in your career, and how have you turned that situation around?
Oh, all right. I'm 41, so my perspective is a little different than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I would have said my biggest challenge would be getting the next job. Just because that's it. It's freelance, and you bounce and you bounce and then climb up the ladder. Now, honestly, my biggest challenge is keeping somewhat normal personal life with a completely abnormal professional life. So, and as far as turning it around, it's a day by day answer. So I don't know. Like today, yes, turned it around. I've been doing good balancing it all. Tomorrow, I don't know. So as far as just being a filmmaker, and the biggest challenge in that goes, if you're creative, your biggest challenge is not to listen to everybody else. A lot of creative filmmakers that I've met, they literally are subconsciously repeating the movies they see, the articles they read, all of their absorption of the film business. So as far as like a hurdle goes, I would say that's the biggest hurdle is becoming a filmmaker with a unique voice that's completely your own. You're not stealing from anybody. You're not borrowing from any other movies. Your stories are original. And in a day and age when we have so much, content immersion, that's a hard thing to do. And for me, the content that I've provided, the thing that I've done to turn that around is to kind of go into a little bit of a creative incubator every now and then where It's just me. It's amazing what the human brain can do when you're creatively isolated. So to me, when I hit a wall or I start realizing I'm stealing from really great movies that I saw in the past, or even commercials I saw in Tokyo or something like that, then I go away. Then I lock myself in a room and I get myself refocused. And I think that's a tough thing for artistic people. And I think they can spend their entire lives not realizing that the reason they're failing is because they're just regurgitating the conscious information that they gathered from a movie they liked or something that's on TV.
That's really
Does that
good.
make sense?
No,
Yeah.
I'm like listening, just completely absorbed by what you're saying. Yeah, I think it's a real challenge, isn't it? That kind of that fine line between like a parody and pastiche. I mean, obviously, there's a lot to be said for filmmakers studying all, as many of the great movies that have gone before them as possible, and really absorbing all of that content. But then the challenge is to figure out how you're going to make that new, how you're going to put a twist on it. And that's a really fine
That's right.
line. So Barrett,
Hmm.
what is one thing that you wish you'd known earlier in your career?
Oh, one thing that I wish I knew earlier in my career, to get on a diet and work out more, because craft service and the catering truck are probably the most amazing places on a movie set. I'm
Well,
just saying, like
particularly on the kind of movies that you work on, I would imagine that
God,
your craft service
I mean,
probably
it's
looks a bit better
ridiculous
than,
sometimes.
yeah.
I'll grab a plate, I'll have lobster and steak in it, and I'm running literally across a lot with that great food. And I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't make any sense at all. But yes, you're right. That's on a studio movie. On $5 million projects and below that I've worked on, you might get a wheel of death, a pizza or something like that. So you're absolutely right. I think seriously, the one thing I wish I would have known would be to stick closer to my gut and not to the people around me. Going back to the previous answer, which was, I did a lot of head down, subservient sort of work for a bunch of greedy, godless people. And I think if there's one thing I wish I would have learned or knew or thought of is, over the course of that time where I was kind of clawing my way up, my gut had a lot to say, and I didn't listen to any of it. And so I often wonder if I would have listened to my gut. And there's specific times all throughout, different movies where I had opportunities to kind of, grab the career by the balls and run with it. And unfortunately, I didn't do that. So I think that would be the one thing that I wish I would have really learned is listen to the gut, because it's not always wrong. It's not always impulsive.
Yeah. Barrett, do you have like some daily practices that contribute to your personal success, things that you do routinely that you feel are really essential to you being able to do, have the successful career that you indeed have?
The practical side of me is I wake up, on a movie set or on a television set or anything creative, really. The key is to stay ahead of everybody. And I find that most people while they enjoy sleeping in, I'll wake up at 5 and I will bombard an entire crew. I'm giving away my secret now. So any crews that are listening, this is all prank caller. No, I will. I'll literally bombard them with emails, telling everybody kind of what to do, or providing questions that I need answers for. And so in a way, I know whether that crew is of 10 or that crew is of 200, I know exactly what they're doing during that day, because they're just trying to catch up with me because I woke up 3 hours earlier, or I stayed up 3 hours later than them, one or the other. But to me, on a practical side, that is that's definitely kept me kind of ahead of most. On a spiritual side, for me, I spent a lot of time in in art, and as far as pursuing new artists, and painting. And like I said earlier, I'm terrible at it. I love things that I'm terrible at. I love obsessing over them. Like cooking, can't cook worth a lick. I love Top Chef. I love Master Chef. I love all of that stuff. So with art, I can't do any of it. I'm miserable at it. But I love spending time, looking at new artists, looking for new artists, and and that's my grounding time. So usually I'll spend most of my nights just looking at some kind of visual medium, and then in the morning I'll spend that morning kind of pushing questions and orders, if you will, out to people, and it works.
I
In my
mean,
opinion.
I'm like so curious about this. How do you even deal with the stress of, I think for most of us, just dealing with a crew of like 20 people is in its own right already, can be exceedingly stressful. And here you are dealing with these massive franchise movies, like Fast and the Furious, and, all of the complexities that go on with stunt work and multiple locations and huge sets and, several different units. How do you unwind at the end of that day? I mean, how do you not just get fried by week two of
You
filming?
know, it's really easy. Cocaine in the morning and heroin at night, and it really works well. No, I'm kidding.
So
I'm
you're
kidding.
basically the Wolf of Wall Street, right?
Yeah, exactly. Fancy cars and loose women. Yes, yes. It's the '80s all over again. No, I worked for a producer that was really smart. He's old school. His name's Clayton Townsend, and he was like Oliver Stone's producer, and he's the one that got me into all the Judd Apatow things. And what one thing that he taught me, and a lot of times when you're making a movie, you're just so happy to be there, getting to do what you love on any level, whether you're a set decorator or the director himself, herself, whoever's self. A lot of times you just go, okay, I'm here and I'm going to hire my friends and I'm going to hire, the first person in the door just to get everybody in the door so that we can start making this thing. And what Clayton taught me is that you need to stop immediately and spend time thinking about the chemistry of the characters of the people you're hiring. And when you do that and you hire appropriately, there are friends of mine that I have never hired because they have never fit the chemistry of a film that I've worked on. And there are enemies of mine that I've hired more than twice because they fit the chemistry of the film I'm working on. But when you do that, when you hire appropriately and you can trust appropriately and you can let go of certain components of the film, knowing that those are the right people in that position and they're going to do their jobs great. And that's how I rest easy, because I know that when they come to me and they say, this is where we are, this is what we're doing, and this is what we're thinking about ahead of us, I know that they're right on the money. So yeah, so that's how when you do it that way, the stress doesn't seem so big anymore because it's divvied up into small little chunks that you're not taking on yourself. You're sharing it with all of these other people. And sometimes it's more like the set decorator might look at me and say, oh, this stress is too much. At that point, I know that they're getting the brunt of it and they need a little help. And so that's when, the rest of us step in. So I don't look at it as like it's all on me or it's all on, somebody else. I look at it as there's a whole bunch of elephant legs and we're all standing together holding this thing up.
That's so
If that
good.
makes sense.
No, it makes complete sense. So Barrett, I almost hesitate to ask you this next question because you've already given just so many really practical pieces of information that I think many other people other than myself will have found very helpful. But being that you are kind of a genius in the realm of just finding those shortcuts and those hacks to be able to make make a vision reality. What are any shortcuts or hacks that you can recommend to our listeners, who may be, production managers, line producers, or, simply directors or producers who are trying to figure out how to make a shoot a little bit more viable? Do you have any kind of like go-to moves that you would recommend?
I don't think there are any shortcuts in this business, and I think if you're a hack, you'll be kind of you're not going to make it either, or even a hack meaning just finding a quicker way to point A to point B. I believe, and I hope I get this right. Edward Albee once said, he's a playwright. He said, sometimes you have to go a long distance out of the way in order to come a short distance correctly. And I think that summarizes filmmaking, in my opinion. So I don't necessarily think there's any shortcuts. I think your life is a shortcut, and it's a road that you're on, and you're just trying to get as many other cars on that road as possible. If you're a writer, there are things that you can do to make your experience better tomorrow as opposed to today. I worked for some writers, Chad and Carrie Hayes. They're twins, and recently they did like the Conjuring movies and stuff like that. And one thing they told me a couple of decades ago, oh my God, I'm old. Anyway, one thing they told me a while ago was that if you're a writer, just keep writing. Write. The script you write today, nobody might want, but tomorrow they will. And they were right. They were absolutely right. How many of us wouldn't love, and in producing, it's the same way. You might not like a script today. It might not fit. You might not be able to do anything with it, but you got to kind of stay with it and hang on to it because it might tomorrow. And it's absolutely the case. So as far as like a quick way into DGA or a quick way into SAG or a quick way into this or that, no, I personally haven't found any, and I'll listen to your podcast to hear if anybody else has, because I'll take that advice. But as far as the shortcut of the business, I honestly think if you can stay with this business your whole life, then that was the shortcut and you made it. So I don't think there's any easier path there. Sad to say.
Yeah, I know. You haven't got like the magic ingredient, right? Like add this ingredient to this ingredient and you'll win an Oscar.
Exactly. I used to know, like, I think they changed it, but like 15 years ago, you could go in and make commercials, and that was a great backdoor into the DGA as the production manager. That was a shortcut, I guess, but I think they closed that loophole up now. So I don't know. I don't think there's anything out there. I think that in a weird way, we all have these great shortcuts to filmmaking right now, which is just our technology. But as far as career-wise, no, I don't.
Well, in view of that technology, obviously it's this is an industry that's evolving at a rapid rate. There's a lot of changes that are happening in terms of evolution of this industry. What do you feel is the most important thing for our listeners to understand right now about the evolution of the film industry?
Start learning new trades. It's I am a producer by trade now, I guess. I say I guess because you never know what might happen tomorrow. But the role of a producer is so different now. You have to know budgets, you have to know schedules, you have to know how to create all of it. You have to know how to come at a director who might have, emotional special needs kind of person that you have to speak to delicately, and you have to know how to handle them. And so in just that one sentence, I just told you that a producer is now a first AD, a line producer, a production manager, and a producer.
And a psychiatrist.
Yes, and it's all wrapped up into one. And so with the budget sizes getting smaller, the job titles are getting bigger. And the race, in my opinion, is to figure out who's going to really define that job title the best. And that person will get the most jobs. So, it's an exciting time, in the industry. The industry is changing more than it has in 100 years. And so that's great. But the downside of it is now we're all responsible to helping that definition come into play. And what I'm seeing is smaller movies are growing in popularity, and with smaller movies comes greater responsibility. Wasn't it a Spider-Man line?
Yes.
Greater responsibility to to fulfilling more roles. You can't stand back anymore and say, you know what, that's the coordinator's job. I'm not going to do that. If you could do it, you do it. And so I think that's one of the big shifts, and I think that's going to spill into the studio system too. I think one day we're going to look at studios not as a bunch of executives sitting up in that ivory tower. I think we're going to look at studios as kind of as a keeper of all these different other companies underneath them that develop content and can do multiple levels of things. So that's the thing, is when I look at the way the industry is shifting, I think it's exciting, because I think that we're all now getting to do a lot more. If I was unions and guilds, I'd be shuddering a little bit, in my opinion. But I think it's a good thing. I think wearing more hats is always good. But knowing that is half the battle. Now that's G.I. Joe. I just quoted G.I. Joe for you. I'm sorry about that.
I want to work some bridesmaids quotes in here, being that,
Yeah.
it's definitely one of my favorite productions of yours. So anyway, well, Barrett, we're about to enter our final act, in which we're going to be getting some of your top recommendations. But before we do so, let's take a moment to thank our sponsors. When you're putting together that masterpiece movie, the coloring is a major creative decision. It can make the difference between whether the audience interprets your story as warm, cold, dark, or light, and it can help define the genre of the film. Here's a quick tip. Horror movies tend to have blue tones, romantic comedies tend to have warm tones, apocalyptic movies tend to be grey and washed out, movies in which reality is off-kilter tend to have green tones, and action movies tend to feature a lot of teal and orange, particularly in their artwork. The Emmy Award-winning Da Vinci Resolve from Blackmagic will help you get that perfect color for your next production. The Da Vinci Resolve 12 combines professional non-linear video editing with the world's most advanced color corrector, so you can now edit, color correct, finish, and deliver all from one system. The Da Vinci Resolve is completely scalable and resolution independent, so it can be used on set, in a small studio, or integrated into the largest Hollywood production pipeline. From creative editing and multi-camera television production to high-end finishing and color correction, only Da Vinci Resolve features the creative tools, compatibility, speed, and legendary image quality that you need to manage your entire workflow, which is why it is the #1 solution used on Hollywood feature films. Barrett, welcome to the final act, where you'll be sharing incredible resources and some mind-blowing answers. Are you ready?
Oh, yeah, no pressure at all, yes.
None whatsoever. Barrett, what is the best advice you've ever received?
The best advice I've ever received, I'm trying to think of the politest way to say this. This is going to sound so crass, and I don't know if you actually want to hear this.
Go for it.
But I was a PA in Savannah, Georgia, and the director, Simon West, had lost his super special walkie-talkie in the swamps, and so I was the guy designated to hunt through the swamps for like 4 hours, looking, for his super special walkie-talkie. And I found it, and it was absolutely ruined. Obviously, it was in a swamp. And by the way, that was my first encounter with a leech. I just want you to know. So anyway, so I found it. I brought it back to the producer, who was Mace Neufeld, the guy I talked about earlier. He looked at it. He said, great. He threw it into the dumpster or the trash can. And I said, wait, you're going to tell him that I did this? And he goes, no, I'm not going to tell him you did this. And I said, well, but I found it, and yada, yada, yada. I was kind of being a whiner. I was, new to the business. And he said, sometimes you just have to shut the fuck up and not give the director everything they want all the time. And I said, but I'll get blamed. And he said, better you than I. And he walked away.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, I carried that with me, because knowing your audience is what he was really saying, and he's right. You have to know your audience and know who you're speaking to. If you don't, you'll get more doors closed in your face than opened any time.
Yeah.
So that's what I walked away with, and that's what I've lived by is sometimes directors don't get everything they want, just like sometimes we don't get everything we want, but there's a reason for that, and we have to figure out that reason.
Yeah. Yeah. And it only took you 4 hours of searching for a swamp to get this advice.
Oh my gosh, this swamp was the worst. It was like the day after the crew was there, so they had trampled over everything. And I was finding all kinds of crazy madness in there, like first aid kits and like it was absolutely terrible. Yes, I mean, I'm pretty sure if it was today that would have happened, I would have probably have started a Facebook campaign against that movie for brutality. But back then it was, you do what you do. So,
oh my gosh. I honestly, I could spend hours listening to all of your film set stories.
No.
Truly. So Barrett, if you had one movie to stake your entire career on, what kind of movie would it be, and what talent would you want attached?
Talent's a fickle thing. They come and they go. I have ones that I love. I mean, classic ones from Tom Hanks down to, other folks that I think are ones that will boom and pop, in years to come. I think the type of movie that everybody searches to make studio-wise, are you asking me what kind of movie I would want to make as far as content-wise? Is that okay, I gotcha. Well, the movie I'd want to make content-wise would be something around the Mexican Revolution. That's something that has always been a dream of mine, and my partner and I are absolutely obsessed with Zapata, Emiliano Zapata. So that's kind of the dream movie that we would like to make at some point in our careers. But and as far as cast goes, any Mexican that's willing to play ball, I'm in. So yes, that's what that would be. But that's it. I mean, really, the thing that we like about that is that it's got a lot of heart to it, and it brings us back to a revolutionary tale, which I don't think we've had any good ones lately. In the past decade, and I don't think American culture truly understands what it means to put your life on the line for a cause that you believe in. I think we equate a cause to a click on a computer screen. So I that's what attracts me to that, and that's what attracts me to any film that's like that. It's time to make a difference with the talent that we have, and I kind of got done making movies that didn't make a difference.
Well, you've seen a lot of obviously of very big budget movies get greenlit. What do you reckon is like the movie that studios want to be making right now?
As far as a movie that I would like to be making right now, that's greenlit.
No, I mean, what is like the type of movie? If there's like an archetype that you really believe studios want to make at this point in time.
Oh. I believe that studios are going to cycle through a little PTSD. We're kind of on the middle of that PTSD curve where everybody's making, veteran war coming home movies. Superheroes are kind of getting their due and almost done, hopefully. I don't know how many times we can reboot Batman, but apparently we are over and over and over again, and Spider-Man 2. So I think the way movies are going to go are a little bit more original. I think, in the early 2000s, we had a great phase where studio films and popcorn movies that Jerry Bruckheimer invented in the 90s started going away. And out of that going away was the rise of these great independent films that kind of took over, art house screens and spilled over into mainstream screens. So I think the type of movie that's going to come up is spiritually based. I'm not saying a faith film. I'm saying spiritually based movies that have a unique character to them. Think Black Swan, meets I don't know, anything with the Apostle. Is that even possible? Would
That's a
Duvall put on some ballet shoes
you
for me
heard
and
it here
dance around?
first. You know
I don't
what,
know.
Barrett? I sure hope you're right. I truly do. Well,
I would love to see him in some ballet shoes. I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
Barrett, if you could recommend one book for our listeners, what would it be and why?
One book.
Mm-hmm.
You know what? I wouldn't recommend. I I don't believe in filmmaking books. I don't think they help you. I don't. What I do believe in is if you're creative, start picking up plays and start reading them, and not for the blocking or anything like that. For the dialogue, most scripts that I read are terrible when it comes to characters' voices. And then the other thing that I would say is basically pick up. I hate to say this. Let me clarify. I love books. If you went up to my office attic thing upstairs right now, you would see that I have way more books than I should. But when it comes to filmmaking, I think it's a very visual medium, and I think understanding that is based in your daily perceptions. So I would say, pick up IndieWire, pick up all of those type of magazines, and find some visual inspiration outside of that. Books on filmmaking, I don't get into at all. I don't want to read about M. Night Shyamalan's, and I've read them. M. Night had a great little compassionate thing in his book about Disney and all of that stuff. But I think it's all bias, and it's their story. It's not your story. And so what I'm trying to say is screw books, go find your story and then write that.
Yeah.
And in that's going to be found online in magazines and music and plays and, all of that other stuff around you. I'm sorry, that's probably a terrible answer, but that's kind of the way my perception is. I avoid filmmaking books at all costs. I do.
Well, maybe you can
Yeah.
recommend a non-filmmaking book.
Well, I'm a spiritual guy, so I just, and this is going to come out of left field because it's nothing that we've talked about, but I just read a book by A.W. Tozer called Art and Worship. So, so that's just a little out there, but I find that there's a lot of correlation between whatever you consider spiritual and storytelling. So, I would recommend, finding those type of books that inspire you the most. Because honestly, that's what we're all about now. I mean, go find a book that kind of tells a tale that you fall in love with, and then, go make it, option it, right? That's
Absolutely.
what you do.
And Film Talk Nation, I know that you love audio. To thank you for joining us today, we've partnered with our friends over at Audible to offer you a free audio book. Great titles available include Story by Robert McKee, Save the Cat Strikes Back by Blake Snyder, Why Not Me by Mindy Kaling, and Your Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. If you haven't already done so, you can claim your free audio book at audibletrial.com/film talk. That's audibletrial.com/film talk. And this link will also be included in today's show notes. Barrett, if you could recommend a movie for our listeners, what would it be and why?
I would recommend, I'm going to go a little old school here. I think Godfather 2 is the best movie structure of all time. I think he really broke some boundaries there with that movie. So if you haven't watched it, shame on you. You're not a human. Go watch it so you can become human. And the other one that I would recommend is Rocky, the first one.
Oh,
if you're an independent filmmaker and you have two pennies to rub together to make a movie, watch Rocky about 1,000 times and you'll start understanding how to make a movie.
And then go watch it 1,001 times.
Yes.
1,000 times is not enough for Rocky.
No, it's such a good movie. And the way it's put together, the things that he did to build production value in that movie when he didn't have any money to do it was genius. Absolutely genius. So those would be the two movies that I would suggest for any budding filmmaker.
Barrett, I would imagine that you're probably possibly a pretty tech-savvy guy, being that you've got just such a strong background in production. Is there a website or an app that you would recommend?
I'm you're right. I'm kind of a nerd. I like all the red chat boards and all of that stuff. I enjoy those. Cinemaphile. The one thing that I do suggest is if you're a filmmaker, download the app Helios, download the app Artemis. These are great apps that you can use, and it'll put you ahead of the curve.
Can
Helios
you maybe,
is
yeah, I was going to say, can you maybe share
based,
with our audience what each of those does?
yeah, Helios is basically what you use to track the sun in any location. You don't have to be at that location. You can put in the longitude, latitude, so that, when you're if you're a director talking to your gaffer, it's always good to know what they're looking at too. So, okay, we're going to start shooting in the front of the house before we move to the back of the house because the sun's popping in this window as opposed to that window. And then Artemis is an amazing app. They're both a little expensive. I think they're like $50 each. But Artemis is a great app because it's literally like a viewfinder. So you have Red, Alexa, DSLRs. It has every kind of camera in there, and all of the lenses that you can use. Now, you're not getting that Cook lens feel, that everybody goes for, but you're going to be able to, on your Scout, or I like to Scout before the Scout so that you know what you're talking about when you're there.
Yeah.
So I'll whip out Artemis. I'll pop in somewhere maybe either 10 minutes early or the day or two before, and you can take screen grabs as if you were there with your Red Epic,
Yeah.
and we're using like a 35. And those things are fantastic. And then you can also translate that into your storyboards and yada, yada, yada. So
And I mean,
those apps,
it seems like it's so cost effective, maybe, particularly for directors who are starting out or who are on a smaller budget, who maybe don't
mm-hmm.
have, kind of the financial means to be able to go for some of the more sophisticated options. To be able to use a simple
For sure.
app like that for $50 is amazing.
Oh yeah, and it really does. It saves your time on set because you're communicating properly to your core, your gaffer, your grip, your cinematographer, and you're talking their language, which is fantastic. Whether a producer, a director, or even a set decorator, like you got to know where that sun's going to be hitting. So it's good. Those are my two favorite apps by all means.
Well, Barrett, it's time for the martini shot. What parting piece of guidance do you want to share with us?
In guidance, that scares me. That's a lot of responsibility. In today's world, we're in such a content immersion state. It's almost like a red alert to where everybody and their mother is making content, and sometimes the people that are making the content, it's not good, but it's funny enough to get it a couple million hits on YouTube. And my challenge, I would rather say, is to rise above all of the crap that's out there. We are, as creatives, we're swimming in a sea of creative garbage because everything can be made on your iPhone or wherever. So my challenge would be to rise above that. Think originally, be creative, and give us something to look forward to tomorrow. So that's all I got.
Great parting words. Well, that's a wrap. Film Talk Nation, in this industry, you're only as good as the people you know. And today you've been hanging out with Barrett Leigh and myself. If you want to go the extra mile, head over to filmtalkpodcast.com and type Barrett Leigh into the search bar. The show notes from today's show will appear along with everything we discussed, like Barrett's recommended book and movie. Barrett, we appreciate you sharing your priceless insight with us today. Film Talk Nation thanks you, and we'll see you on the red carpet.
Thanks. See you later.